Tim, welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at the Corum Ti-Bridge Tourbillon, 42 millimeters in width in titanium. You can see this Corum Ti-Bridge Tourbillon on our website, watchyouwant.com. Purchase it if you like, and if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Watch You Want Inc. On my wrist, 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, you can see that the Ti-Bridge Tourbillon has an entirely different look than its ancestor, the Golden Bridge. Originally designed by Vincent Calabrese, co-founder of the AHCI back in the 70s, it was designed as a concept watch picked up by Corum in 1980 and serialized, albeit only in small numbers as it was Corum's only in-house movement. Later on, in 2009, the Ti-Bridge line was debuted, followed shortly thereafter in 2010 by the Flying Tourbillon Ti-Bridge that you see here. And it is a flying tourbillon. It's also a distinctly different look than the conventional Golden Bridge. This is almost like watching a tourbillon on TV. You can see 52 millimeters from lug to lug. This case has a lot of wrist presence. It's also 13 millimeters thick. So you're going to find that this one wears large, at least in a visual sense. I will tell you that because of the cambered case, which you can see to good advantage in this profile shot, it actually wraps around your wrist. So even as large as this watch is and as small as my wrist is, you can see that the ends of the lugs, the extreme points, are actually inboard of the edges of my wrist, and the strap, which is actually inset into the lugs, you see it actually starts before the case ends, the strap flares out on both sides rather than having to pull in. So this is a large tourbillon watch that not only fits a smaller wrist, but because it is titanium and, let's face it, it contains mostly air, it will fit and wear lightly on a smaller wrist. And that's part of the key here. This is an everyday tourbillon watch. Take that in for a second. This is a tourbillon watch that you can wear every day. Let me explain. Light and wieldy on the wrist, the watch features outstanding ergonomics. So from a standpoint of comfort, you have to make absolutely no concessions to practicality with this watch. Ergonomically, it wears like something that essentially wraps around your forearm. The alligator leather strap is of the highest quality, and again, because the lugs actually start before the case ends, the watch gets an immediate jump start on wrapping around your wrist, and it'll almost stay on without even being buckled as long as you don't turn your arm over. That's how well it cradles your wrist. Moreover, because the underside is a wonderfully buttery soft calfskin leather, it feels very smooth and supple on the wrist. You can see a nice flat, straight-grained case back. It does have a little bit of camber, but there are no outcroppings, there are no ledges, no stepped points or pressure points to create any hot spots on your wrist. Very comfortable. 5 ATM water resistant, so you don't want to take this one in the pool, but you're more than secure against a downpour or a splash. Finally, because of the outstanding quality of the double deployant trigger activated clasp, you can see that this one is built not so much for rough play, but for everyday use. This is a real world watch, and Corum's built it accordingly. Not only does it have a beautifully finished, faceted, brushed and polished double deployant trigger actuated clasp, but when you actually move inboard to the movement itself, one of the standout features for me is that when I look at the Flying Tourbillon carriage, I notice that this is a rare shock-protected tourbillon. You just don't see that too often. The common practice is to build them like they were built in the era of Abraham Louis Breguet, that is, with an unshock-protected balance, the idea being that no one in their right mind is going to wear a tourbillon for anything but a very formal, very gentle, very, shall we say, lightly handled dress occasion. This is a watch that not only has shock protection on the tourbillon, it has water resistance on a tourbillon case, almost unheard of in its own right, made of titanium and fully skeletonized. This is almost tourbillon meets tech with everyday practicality. The Corum CO22 caliber here really is the dial. I can't say that the watch has a dial per se, because it's almost like I'm watching a tourbillon on TV. You have that sort of 70s style TV screen aperture and a broad view of the beautifully hand-finished CO22. A couple of highlights. It is a flying tourbillon, and I mentioned that term, but I want to fully explain what it means. For those of you who might be experiencing this complication for the first time, a flying tourbillon, invented in the first half of the 20th century in German watchmaking, features an anchor point on the bottom, but no bracing bridge on the top, so it appears to be suspended in air. And indeed, that is the aesthetic of this watch. It's ethereal, it's gossamer. It's almost as if the tourbillon and movement elements are floating or suspended within the case, whereas the case itself is very solid, monolithic, and masculine. It's a great contrast, aided and abetted by the different textures, the different materials, the different finishing standards, and grayscale tones. Now, it does feature twin mainspring barrels, which you can see with ease above and below the baguette bridge. Now, 72-hour or 3-day power reserve. It is a manual wind watch, and when you wind this one, it's an absolute pleasure. You can hear it, you can feel it. It winds buttery smooth, but with just enough detent that you can sense the ratchet. A manual wind watch should feel great when you're winding it, especially when it's a tourbillon housing. And this is a pleasure to wind. Once every 3 days is all it takes. It's quality time spent interacting with your watch, not a daily chore. It is a 21 joule, 21,600 vibration per hour movement, and it is built and finished in-house by Corum. So what you're looking at is an entirely manufactured product here, not just a Corum original with the bridge design, but Corum in every respect, down to the execution and design of the tourbillon. And you can see that iconic Corum double key logo. Now, Corum's not a very old company, so when this debuted in 2010, it was a 55-year, 55th anniversary present to itself and its collectors. So you can see how far the company has come since those first models, like the Chinese hat in 1958 and the Admiral's cup in 1960. Very impressive, very wearable, and with a cool technical aesthetic. It's not a overly formal dress watch that you simply wouldn't feel right wearing with short sleeves or in an informal occasion outside of black tie galas. This is a great watch that people tend to love because it's fun, it's different, and yet it has horological interest in that it's beautifully made and it features a classical complication in a rather rugged setup, I have to say. The combination of titanium, water resistance, shock resistance, 3-day power reserve, and beautiful what's known as R-cap bridges and plates means that the watch is also highly anti-magnetic. It does actually meet the ISO standard for an anti-magnetic watch, and a big part is that unique movement architecture in R-cap. It's actually a nickel-copper compound, so chemically it's not that different from what they call German silver that's used on the Jaeger-LeCoultre Duomet line, as well as all Alanga Unsuna movements. This is a fantastic example of a traditional material executed in a 21st century style with black and gray PVD. Nevertheless, the actual bridge itself, the main plate, which doubles as the baguette bridge and links with the R-cap supporting struts, is beautifully polished with a mirrored chamfer along its sides. You also see black polish on the screws of the tourbillon carriage and gorgeous straight graining on the Corum key, the components of the regulator itself, the bracing bridges, as well as the main baguette, and it does feature unique satin finishing on the hands, as well as a sort of sunburst dressage or radial graining on the mainspring barrels, with a kind of Venetian blind guilloche of the background of the case beneath the movement. Now, there is a small display aperture on the case back, so you can appreciate the wheel train, mainly the winding system on the back, the keyless works that transfers power to the mainspring barrels, as well as the straight-grained underside of the baguette main plate. This is an outstanding example of a tourbillon that has zero pretense, offers incredible value, manufacture substance, and a very contemporary style. If you like big watches, modern watches, if you like the Richard Mille aesthetic, if you want something that is undoubtedly an artisanal product, handmade, featuring rare crafts and a very rare exotic haute horologerie complication, you have to check out the Corum Ti-Bridge, a flying tourbillon, 42 millimeters wide in brushed and polished titanium, available on our website, watchyouwant.com.